Hey, I said you're in for a treat today. The treat is a shorter than normal sermon and a chance to hear from our guest, Mallory. I'm going to talk about what it means to be a peacemaker. So the title for today's brief sermon is What's Up with Being a Peacemaker? This fits into the series that I'm doing. To be completely honest with you, no one asked me what's up with being a peacemaker. But the title kind of fit with the series, so I made up that question, and I'm cheating just a little bit. So here's the big idea for today's message. People who follow Jesus make peace. Definition of a peacemaker is a person who restores unity to things or relationships that have broken apart. I had to be a peacemaker recently. I was upset with my neighbor. My neighbor was doing something that annoyed me. He was shooting a gun kind of toward my house, and I was annoyed by that. And I went over and talked to him, and I wasn't as nice as a pastor should be. So the next day, I had to walk back over in the morning and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I think it was a legitimate concern, but I was a little angrier than I should have been, and I apologize, because I don't want us to be enemies as neighbors. And it's hard. That's not easy to do. But all of us have to do it sometimes, right? With family members or people at work or other folks like that. I want to start with a number of reasons why it is important to be a peacemaker. And the first one is that Jesus was a peacemaker. And this shows up, it's really interesting, this shows up at the beginning of Jesus' life, and it shows up at the end of Jesus' life. I'm going to read a couple of passages that are normally thought of as Christmas passages. First one is from Isaiah. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Zechariah, another passage that often makes its way into Christmas sermons, reads, Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. If you look at the very beginning of Christ's life in Luke chapter 2, it says, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And if you jump to the end of Jesus' life, in John chapter 14, Jesus says, Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I don't give to you as the world gives. So the first thing is that Jesus is a peacemaker, and when we make peace, we look like Jesus. And we've talked about this verse last because it's one of my favorite verses, Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. I had what I took as a real compliment from my daughter Megan a couple times in the last couple weeks is she's looked at her baby Calvin, and she said, Dad, I think he looks like you. And man, it's like, wow, that's wonderful. I don't necessarily see it, but if she sees it, that's wonderful. But it made me feel good that someone thought there was someone, one of my grandchildren, who sort of looked like me. And this is what happens is when we are peacemakers, people look at us and say, look, there goes one of God's children. I can tell because they resemble their parent. So when we are peacemakers, people say, look, there goes one of God's children. Being peacemakers is evidence that God's Spirit is working in us. So there are all kinds of things we can look for to see if we are growing spiritually. Some people will measure how often they read their Bibles, or how much they go to church, or something like that. And those are great things to work on. But in Galatians chapter 5, it says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. So if you want to see if you're growing spiritually, one thing to look at is, am I growing in peace? Am I more at peace with other people? Am I more at peace with myself and with my God? But am I experiencing peace in my life? That's a measure of how much God's Spirit is working in us. Then another thought is that God has called us to a ministry of peacemaking. In 2 Corinthians 5:18, it says, Jesus reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. We are called to be reconcilers. We have a ministry of reconciliation. And that's so much of what Preemptive Love Coalition. You'll see that when Mallory comes up and tells her story, but they are just a living example of doing that. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, the followers of Jesus have been called to peace. They must not only have peace, but make it. So that is part of our job as Christians. Here's the last point. Peacemakers have beautiful feet. You didn't see that one coming, did you? Isaiah 52 verse 7 says, how beautiful are the mountains and how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who bring good tidings and proclaim salvation, who say to Zion, your God reigns. So I don't know, I don't tend to measure people up by how beautiful their feet are. But according to Isaiah, even our feet become beautiful if our feet are involved in ministries of peacemaking and bringing good news to people. So if you've been concerned about the beauty of your feet, which probably none of you have been, you can work on peacemaking. So I want to share just a few things of what peacemakers do, and then we're going to try to see if we can get the trailer to work. And then Mallory's going to come up and talk to us, and I'm really anxious to hear what she has to say. Here are some things peacemakers do. One thing is we greet each other in peace. I think there's 7 books in the New Testament where in the opening line it says grace and peace to you, but it starts with a greeting of peace. As Christians, we are not that good. That's not necessarily a part of our tradition, but Jewish people will often greet their friends by saying shalom, which is a blessing of peace. Muslim people will often say, may peace be upon you. I wish we had thought of that, because I think that's a beautiful way to greet people. And it's thoroughly biblical to wish peace upon people when we greet them. Another thing that peacemakers do is peacemakers greet strangers. And again, I'm landing back on one of my favorite passages, Sermon on the Mount, toward the end of chapter 5. Listen to this. This is so powerful. And this gets right at what Mallory's going to be talking about. I hope I'm not stealing your points, Mallory. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Don't even tax collectors do that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Don't even pagans do that? So Jesus brings this up. Of all the things for him to bring up, he brings up this idea that I want you to greet people that you don't know. And the word stranger doesn't just mean that you don't know them. It's actually a word that it technically means an immigrant, an alien, someone from a different country. But everyone greets people. We all greet people who look like us and who we know. But next time you're at Walmart and you run into a Haitian family or a Latino family, even if there's a language barrier, just smile and say hello. And that means a lot to people who often kind of feel like maybe they're not wanted. But that's part of what we're called to do, is to greet people with a blessing of peace. Here are some other things peacemakers do. Peacemakers place ourselves in the middle. This is the nasty part of peacemaking. And it's the least favorite part of my job as pastor, is when I have to place myself in the middle of people who are not getting along and trying to make people. But that is what peacemakers do. Scott McKnight wrote, peacemaking is neither being nice, as it is defined today, nor is it being tolerant, as it is defined today. Rather, it is active entrance into the middle of warring parties for the purpose of reconciliation and peace. Where are people not getting along? wherever it is, that's an opportunity for us as followers of Jesus to step into the middle and to help people make peace. One area where I'm doing that is my service on the Clark County Law Enforcement Advisory Team. That's part of why I'm on that team, is I want to play an active role in making sure that there's peace and a good relationship between our people in law enforcement, who I really respect, and many of our minority groups who may sometimes are wary of the police. That's why I do that, is because that's part of what we're called to do. We place ourselves in the middle. Another thing peacemakers do is they hold things and people together. Bonhoeffer again said, peacemakers maintain fellowship when others would break it off. There's an interesting story that unfolds in the New Testament where there's a falling out between Paul and Mark. And they have this big blow up. And everyone separates and they're fighting with each other and it's really ugly and things break down. But there are a couple of people who intentionally stay in the middle and stay friends with people on both sides. That's a real practical way of being a peacemaker, is you know people who are at war with one another. Don't choose sides. Try to stay connected with each one in the hope that eventually you can help to help them make peace, hold things together. Another thing, I have two more points, and I'm going to introduce, we'll try the trailer, and then I'll introduce Mallory. Peacemakers renounce the right to have it our way. This is an important part of peacemaking, is giving up the right to have it our way. And sometimes, if you're at war with someone, you may have a right to your side of whatever the issue is, but if you want to be a peacemaker, you voluntarily give up something that you are entitled to for the sake of making peace. And the life of Christ, the life of following Christ, is a life of sacrifice, not demanding our way, not forcing our beliefs or values or customs on other people, but of peacemaking and engaging in that discipline. Then the last point is that peacemakers seek to restore wholeness in the world. It's one thing for us to make peace on a small scale with a few of the people around us, but it's really cool when the body of Christ steps up at a larger level and seeks to restore wholeness in the world. That's what Preemptive Love Coalition does. That's what Larry Stratton is doing with Free Burma Rangers in the jungles of Myanmar, is he's trying to restore wholeness and peace in areas where there is none. Hey, do we have the trailer ready to go? Can we give it a try? Everyone who normally works in our sound booth took vacation this week. So we are all learning how to make things work. Mallory, why don't you come on up and I think I'm going to just go ahead and introduce Mallory, and you can act out the trailer. And Micah, which handheld mic do you want me to use? The blue one? This is my new friend, Mallory Wyckoff. She is from the Nashville area. Reached out to me on email way back around January, asking if we might have an opportunity like this. So welcome to Central.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and I'm looking forward to the event at 3.
Yes,
so you can
likewise.
take the platform here if you like.
Thank you. I'm finishing up with a little sore throat, so I brought my water just in case. Friends, my name is Mallory Wyckoff. It's lovely to be with you. I serve as Key Relationships Officer with an organization called Preemptive Love Coalition. We are a global community of peacemakers, and our vision and mission is to stop the spread of violence and to end war, right? Which is no small thing, and we are seeing beautiful impact towards that end. I want to share just a little bit about our story, but then really give you a sense of who we are and what we're up to in the world. And then, if you both want to grab a copy of the books and the resources that are out there, as Carl said, those are free resources for you. But then also in the film screening later this afternoon, you'll get an even fuller sense kind of our story and who we are. But really, we started when some folks from the United States moved to Iraq as Christian missionaries with a particular sensibility in mind and an understanding of what they were going to do and this idea of going to convert other people. And really quickly, as they started to build relationships with folks who were different from them in various ways, they continued to find that they themselves were the ones who were being changed, through relationship and through engagement with other people and other experiences and stories and ways of being. And so this broadened their understanding of themselves, of God, of the world, and really out of that Preemptive Love Coalition was born. We got our start helping to connect children with heart surgeries. One of the brutal, devastating impacts of war and chemicals used in war and warfare is that particularly in Iraq, it was such a surge and an increase in heart defects among little babies and children. And so you had these families who are our co-founders who we're getting connected to, and the families are coming desperately to them saying, our babies are sick, they're going to die if they don't have access to this care, we don't have access to it, can you help us? And so it just got started as organically as that. So we were helping to connect folks who desperately needed care for their children with that care. But interestingly, pretty soon we realized that there was more than just that interaction or even that transaction, if you will, of connecting these families with the medical care that they needed and for these children, because we were asking Arab families to go to Israel and to allow their children to be operated on by Israeli doctors. And if you know anything about the history and the complexity of these areas and the conflicts that are there, you have families who are now finding themselves on different sides of divides and conflict and history. And as a mother with 2 little girls, imagining that you're asking me to place my little one in the hands of someone who I've been told not to trust, or who I perhaps have been felt vulnerable around, and you're asking me to place this little one in their hands. That's no small thing. And you have these Israeli doctors who are now operating on these littles who in ways they might have been told they're not worth as much, or they might grow up to harm you, or whatever the narratives may be at the time. And so we realized really quickly again that it was more than just this transaction, but rather that we had to be about peacemaking. We had to be about changing the narratives that lead to war and to violence. And so that's a thread that you will see through everything that we do. I'm not sure if the PowerPoint is working. If you want to go ahead and start that if you can. But I want to give you a sense of our work and what we're about. So you will find us, as Carl said, often in places that are the most violent, at times where war is still active and ongoing. You'll find us working in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Venezuela, in Colombia, and the US-Mexico border, and then the southern Mexico border, as well as some work in the United States. We continue to expand and evolve, but that's currently where we are at work. And our work takes place really in 3 kind of categories, if you will. The first is relief. So we want to show up on the front lines of conflict and provide relief for folks who have been most impacted by that conflict. The form that this relief takes can vary depending on what individuals really need. It might be kits for mothers traveling with small children who are seeking asylum at the US-Mexico border. It might be winter survival kits for our friends in Syria as the winter is coming. It might be month-long food kits for friends in Iraq. In Beirut, after the port blasts last year in August, where we're about to come on that 1-year milestone of that port blast there in Lebanon, it's rebuilding homes. So relief can take a lot of different forms. Again, we want to show up on the front lines of conflict at times when the bombs are literally still falling, but our teams are incredibly courageous, showing up in spaces. Particularly, we're looking for spaces where folks are not likely to receive aid and relief from other organizations because they are in perhaps more remote areas, or where things are just so dangerous that other groups are not yet willing and able to go in, and our teams go in and provide relief for the folks that they need. We're wanting to mend the wounds of the war and provide help fast. The second category of our work is jobs. We realized really quickly in this work that a loss of jobs and economic opportunities is both a result of war and conflict and violence, but also a really important contributing factor towards violence and conflict. So for instance, some of our team was traveling in southern Iraq a few weeks ago with some communities that we had not yet really connected with. And we were talking to some young boys, 14, 15, 16, who had joined militias in the area. And so we were just getting a sense of their stories and who they were, and realized that while legally they can't work until they're 18, they're old enough to join a militia, and it's the only economic opportunity that they have access to, and that they need to be able to gain income to help provide for their families. This is their only option. So we just asked them, if you had another option, if there were other opportunities available to you, would that be preferable to you? Would you accept that? And without question, it was yes. We don't want to fight. We don't want to be part of these conflicts. This is literally all we've got. And so what we want to do is not only show up fast and provide relief, we want to provide help that lasts. And that is through job creation and creating economic opportunities. This can take a number of different forms, but really what we often do is show up for folks and in communities and ask them, what is it that you want to do? What skills do you already have? What is it that you want to bring into the world, services that you want to provide, ways that you want to be part of your community and providing income for your families? So we have friends who perhaps they had a dress shop, a clothing shop, and then their lives were disrupted by war and violence in Iraq, and perhaps ISIS invaded their community and overtook their shop. And now a few years later, they want to get back into that field, but they don't have the resources and income. We partner with them. We provide the capital that they need to start up, all the resources that they need, but we also provide a full year of one-to-one job coaching to help ensure the success of these businesses. At the end of the first year of those businesses, we're at a 92% success rate of these businesses remaining open. Now, for anyone who has ever had an entrepreneurial effort or involved in business, that's an incredibly high success rate, not to mention that we are talking about really vulnerable areas that still are torn apart in many ways by conflict and violence. And in these spaces, these businesses are thriving. About 40% of these businesses are run by women. And one of the things I love most about our job creation is that we don't own these businesses. These are not Preemptive Love's businesses. They're not ours. These belong to our friends. We come alongside of them and offer the support that they need, the resources they need, but they have full agency over these businesses and their jobs. They get to decide, what do they want to sell? What service do they want to provide? Do they want to scale up? What does success look like for them? And it varies. For some people, it's, I just need to make a little to support my family. And for other people, it's, I want to open this big store and I want to be able to then provide jobs for other folks in my community. One of the most beautiful things is to see when our friends who were the recipients of that aid and relief and support are now able to return and offer that kind of support and relief to their neighbors. They themselves were having to get everything on credit for years, and now they've been able to pay off their debts, have plenty of money to provide for their families, and now offer that to those in their community as well. That's a beautiful circle of mutuality and reciprocity that we see there. The third category of our work is community. We are, as we said, we're on a mission to end war and to stop the spread of violence. And we absolutely believe that that requires everybody. Nobody gets to be left out of that. No one group gets to own that. No one identity, no one religion. This is going to be a worldwide global community of peacemakers, of folks who are willing to say, in my own community, I'm willing to wage peace. I talk to folks all the time, connected to my work with Preemptive Love and elsewhere, where they feel so discontented by the state of discourse, the state of relationships, the state of division among communities and families even, and yet they don't necessarily know what to do about it. They feel really frustrated, but they also feel ill-equipped. And so what we want to do is to help come alongside and to resource and equip people so that they indeed can wage peace in their families, in their churches, in their mosques, in their neighborhoods, in their cities, wherever they live all across the world. We have peacemaking workshops that I can share more about with you at the table as well as during our talk this afternoon. But again, equipping people with basic and requisite peacemaking skills that all of us need and few of us have, if we're honest. We want to really show up and provide those resources for folks. I want to give an example of how these three come together, this work of relief, jobs, and community. And I know it might be hard to see with some of the lighting, but this is one of my favorite projects that we've done at Preemptive Love Coalition. I've been part of the organization as a financial partner for far longer than I have been on staff. And this has always been, both as a donor and even as a staff member, one of my favorite projects. What you see here is some of the women and children at our maker space. So we partner with a refugee camp in Iraq. This is a Syrian refugee camp, so we had Syrian folks who have had to flee the civil war there. They are now taking up residence here at this camp. They've been there for years. This is home now. They likely won't return to Syria, at least not anytime soon, as the war still rages there. And we were coming alongside of women and helping them to make soaps. If you're familiar with our work at all, you've seen our website, you've seen our soaps and various beautiful products that our friends make. And we realized that while this was having a great economic success for these families, that these women were having to create soaps and candles and things in their tents. And they have little, children running around and families, and these were not the safest conditions for them. So we realized we need to create a space for them to be able to come, to work, to have community together, and so forth. So we created the Maker Space. It's this beautiful building inside of a refugee village that our friends are able to come each and every day to ply their crafts. They sew. They make candles. Now we're doing pottery, which is so exciting to me as a budding pottist, I like to say, which isn't a real term, but I love seeing the work that they're doing. So they're coming together every day to create things. There's a safe space for their kids to have childcare there, where they're being loved on and poured into, and a safe space for them to be nurtured and to thrive as well. So you see some of those precious faces there. So we provided relief in this camp, providing jobs and economic opportunities for these families. But then also that third piece of community. So as I said, these were refugees from fleeing the war and violence in Syria, which now the civil war there has raged for over 10 years. And we realized that in this particular refugee camp that there were two primary groups of folks that had come from two particular communities in Syria. Two communities that did not trust each other. Two communities that did not really like each other. And yet now they're forced to be neighbors in this refugee camp. And now you have women sitting next to one another whose families have been part of these communities who, again, that have had that sense of distrust and discord and disconnection. And here they are each and every day coming together to work. And so we just started engaging in conversation with them. We're at leading dialogue times where they can share their experiences, where they can share their hearts and their stories. And as they're sewing together and stitching together these towels and dolls and things, they're stitching together new stories. They're stitching together new ways of being and thinking and understanding about themselves and their neighbors and the world. They're literally waging peace with their hands. When I think about these women who are putting their hands to clay or holding the needles or making the soap or the candles, what they're doing is using their hands to tell a better story, to glimpse a more beautiful world that we believe and know is possible, and then putting their hands to make that world possible, to make it so. You'll hear more about that if you read the book out there, as well as in the film, this idea of the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. I think that language in the Christian tradition here, very similar to this notion of the kingdom of God, is this idea of where all things are made well, all things are right. The more beautiful world that we know is possible, can we live into that now? These women are doing just that, and they're thriving, their families are thriving, even in the midst of a refugee camp where what brought them there was war and conflict and violence, but now they're telling a different story for themselves, their families, and for the world. There's so much more that can be shared, but I hope this gives you just a glimpse of kind of who we are and the type of work that we're up to. As Carl said, today at 3 o'clock, we'll have a film screening. It's a brief film about 32, 33 minutes long, but it is beautiful and powerful. It gives a fuller picture of our story, but also about this posture that we take, which is this idea of loving anyway, continuing to show up even across enemy lines for folks who we maybe have not trusted or they have not trusted us. Even in the midst of spaces where bombs are still falling, literally and figuratively, what does it look like to show up in those spaces, to put yourself in the middle, as Carl said, to wage peace there, that type of posture? That's what the film is about, and then we'll explore what that looks like in dialogue, because I know there are challenges and risks to that, and also incredible beauty that's possible. I hope you're able to come join us for that film screening. Either way, I'll be at the back table here at the conclusion of the service, and I hope I get the chance to meet you and to get to know you a little bit. But I've also got a sign-up sheet there. If you're at all interested and would like for me just to follow up with you, providing any information that I can that would be helpful for you to know about our organization, jot down your name and email. I'll follow up with you. If you're not able to get a copy of the resources, put your name and email. I'll make sure you get some. Friends, thank you for the invitation to be here with you today. It's been a delight, and I look forward to further conversation after the service as well as at the film screening this afternoon. Thank you.
Hey, Mallory, before you leave, I want to ask, as the praise band's getting ready to take over, there may be some here who won't be here this afternoon. Tell us a little bit about the peacemaking course that you offer and what that kind of does, and just a little bit about that, because I would love for us as a church to explore doing that.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, that kind of third category of our work is this idea of community, and that peacemaking really undergirds everything that we do. So we offer free resources to folks to help equip them to be able to wage peace. One of those resources is what we call our Love Anyway workshops. These are free and open to anybody. We offer them quarterly. The next round will start in August, so just a few weeks away. And there's an hour a week for 4 weeks. They're offered at several different times each week to try to make it accessible to everybody. And again, they're really just designed to provide basic and requisite peacemaking skills. That's really accessible, really, really compelling and practical. And so if you're interested at all, just let me know, jot down your email address. I'll send you the link so that you can sign up. We have other opportunities where we have gatherings where people come together across lines of difference to engage in conversation and build relationship with one another and have really difficult conversations. We have, for instance, in Atlanta, there's a group of police officers and Black mothers. We have groups of Muslims and Christians who come together. We have gatherings of war veterans and civilians and other folks who have found themselves on various sides of difference, real and perceived, and are coming together intentionally to wage peace and to move forward in beautiful ways. So we have those gatherings as well that are open. Would love to get you connected with any of those resources.
Great, thank you. Looks like we're taking